Welcome to episode 8 of the Pressure Point Dojo here on Channel Fight. I'm Chris Thomas, your host, and I'm the chief instructor of the Kyushu Jitsu Kenkyukai. Thank you for joining me. My teacher, George Dillman, and I wrote a number of books together which covered the technical features of the things that I am sharing with you here on the Pressure Point Dojo. And it was back in the early 90s. We had written our first 2 books. They'd been published. They'd been selling well. And I get a phone call from my teacher. He said, I want to start working on our 3rd book. I'm going to come over and we'll start shooting pictures the week after next. Now, that was kind of unusual in the sense that I usually didn't shoot any pictures until I'd really planned things out. Part of the reason for that was simply cost. We had to shoot in film back then, and film was expensive. But if you know my teacher, you know that once he's got his mind set, that's what happens. And so sure enough, week after next, there he was. He came over to my home where in the basement I had a large studio that I used for shooting pictures that I used in magazine articles and in our books. And we spent several days shooting pictures. The thing is, he said, I want to do the book on tuité, or tuité jitsu. The grappling aspect, the joint manipulation aspect that we've talked about previously. And I wasn't ready because, to be honest, I came out of a very traditional karate background where the idea of joint locking and joint manipulation wasn't a thing. I was all about hitting. And so I really was drawn to Kyushu Jitsu because there's a lot of hitting involved. But I wasn't so comfortable with the tuité aspects. So it was a little terrifying because I thought, okay, I understand basic tuité, I can do it, but I'm not sure I can do it well enough to write about. But we spent days shooting pictures. And when we were done, and everyone had left, I laid all of the photos on the floor of my studio with little walkways in between groups of pictures. They were clumped by technique. And I stared at them until I began to see the relationship between different things. The result of that was this book, which is entitled Advanced Pressure Point Grappling Tuité. But the really important thing about this book is not all of the great techniques that are in here, but rather the fact that in order to write it well, I knew that I had to be able to articulate principles that could be reproduced by others. And so thinking about the things that I've observed my teacher doing, things that I was discovering myself as I was practicing tuité, I articulated 9 principles of tuité. And when I teach them, people get better. And so I want to share them with you. Now, this is going to take us a few episodes because I'm not going to share all 9 in one episode. We'll cover 1 or more each episode for the next couple of episodes until we get through all 9. Trust me, it is worth your time to learn this content. So let's go into the master class. For me as a pressure point practitioner, obviously the first one that I wanted to talk about was using pressure points. That was how I got into the whole notion of doing tuité, of doing joint manipulation. I didn't come at it from the perspective of someone who was doing an art like judo or jiu-jitsu where that's a primary practice. I was a karate guy. I was used to hitting. So for me, it was like, okay, what do I hit to get this thing to work? And so the idea of pressure points made sense as a way to access. So let's take a look at that right now with a couple of techniques. When we talk about using pressure points, we kind of have 2 ideas in mind. One is that we'll sometimes say it this way: attack a point to attack a joint to attack a point. Pressure points will release the joints and make the joint function. And when we teach this one, we almost always will go with armbar. If I take an arm like this and I have it bent and he's strong and he is strong, I can bang on him all I want and I can't make this thing work. But if I activate the pressure point, which is triple warmer 10, which is located in the tendon. By the way, pressure points are activated in different ways. This is a pressure point which is only activated by rubbing. You saw me hitting, didn't do anything. If I rub it, it releases. Now what it's actually releasing is not so much his elbow, it actually releases his shoulder. If you watch this, the shoulder starts to kick out. The elbow then releases because by rubbing this point, I'm tricking the spinal reflex into believing that the tendon is tearing. So I want to attack the joint, but to get there, I have to use a pressure point. So since we're talking about rubbing and hit points, let me make that observation again so you can see the distinction. Here, I'm rubbing, and I'm using the bone of my forearm, and I'm kind of doing this sort of a wiggling motion. You can also do it here with your knuckle, but that was always, Professor J was incredible at doing this. He would grab gi and then use this rubbing action right here to put this pressure on. For me, that was, I guess my hands just weren't used to doing that. So I preferred forearm, but you can see me rubbing here, strong. As I rub, I get a reaction. If I come up here into the middle of the tricep, there's a point called triple warmer 12. If I rub in that point, I don't get the reaction. But if I hit that point, down he goes. Again, it's that same idea. This is a point that releases the joint, releases the shoulder because it tricks the spinal reflex into believing that the bone is going to break. And so the body moves to escape the threat. That's what's happening. So what you can see is by attacking these pressure points, I get to the joint technique I'm after. It's what causes the joint to release. Every joint has a pressure point that can release it. The shorthand version of it is just kind of imagine draw an X through the joint and just picture 4 dots. And you can use those as a sort of reference point. That's a pretty good way to do it. So if I'm doing a finger technique, for example, when I grab on here, if I think of touching right here, I'm just imagining a little X. Yeah, it turns out there is a pressure point there. It lies on the small intestine meridian. But if I just touch that, I get an effect. So if he's strong on me and I touch that point, technique works. If we're doing what's called kotegaeshi, there's a pressure point right here that if I can activate that pressure point, then it's very easy for me to do. I can also look at it from a different perspective. He's very strong. If I catch the lung meridian, I weaken his grip. That makes it easy for me to put on the technique. If I come from the other side and I'm grabbing a pressure point called heart 6 on the other side of his wrist, so heart 6 is right here. So if I grab heart 6, then again, it's very easy for me to put the joint technique on. So by touching the pressure point, I release the joint. So that's what we mean when we say attack the point to attack the joint. Now, here's the flip side of that. Let's say that he's pushed my hand down because he wants to punch me in the face, and I go like this, and I'm thinking, I'm going to put him into, I don't know what you guys call this. Every system has its own name for this technique. We call it a wrist turn press. But this, I don't know, center lock or S lock, something like that. But here's what I want you to see. As soon as I do this motion, look, there's a pressure point right there. In other words, the process of moving into the joint technique exposes a pressure point on his arm that I can then just hit because it's become incredibly vulnerable. That's large intestine 10, by the way. And that's going to be true anytime you start to manipulate a joint. A pressure point is going to appear that's very vulnerable, and you can simply attack that point. Now, that vulnerability may be on the arm, but it could be in a surprising location. So let's say, we'll go back to kotegaeshi. When I'm doing this movement right here, this point is triple warmer 3. Anytime I'm twisting the arm like this, I'm creating all kinds of pressure along that triple warmer meridian, that's sometimes called sanjiao in Chinese. And look, this is triple warmer meridian, came right towards me. So by grabbing his arm and doing this, I expose the pressure point to attack. So I attack the joint in order to attack the point. Use pressure points. First principle. Okay, so remember we looked at some cheats before, and you can actually see in there a few of them were related to tuité techniques. I'm going to go back to pressure point cheats, and we're going to see a little bit more that include that very thing. We're going to join my friend Lionel Froidure in the master class. All right, so triple warmer meridian. There are 2 points that we like to use, and I'm going to show you the cheats involved. So we have these hit points in the middle of the tricep. It's actually in the tricep muscle has like a little
tricep. It actually has three muscle bundles that are together, and where they come together, there's like a little pocket. It's sort of triangular shaped. Right in that pocket is where the point is, and depending on where his elbow is. So if his elbow is down here, the point is like this. If his elbow is like this, the point is here. And this is a hit point, and this point releases his shoulder. And we strike in the direction of the bone. The reason it does this is because this is one of those strain receptors in the bone itself, the fusiform fiber. So when I hit that point directly into the bone, what you'll see is the shoulder releases. Now, once the shoulder releases, then it's very easy to manipulate the elbow. Now, I'm going to show you the cheats, though. This is very important. The direction is this way, but I used to do a cheat a lot. I still do this cheat a lot. First, one of the things that I would do when I'm demonstrating this is I would use this prominence here on my ulna because I have a kind of a bumpy, not everyone has this, but this is, for me, this is a little prominent point, the styloid process here, very like this. So I would come not in, but with a slightly rising motion so that would hook into the point. So that was the first thing I would do to cheat, is I'd get that little hook in there. Then second, I would, see, if you just take an arm and you raise it like this, you just loosened up that shoulder. If at the same time you take this hand and go like this, you just loosened up that shoulder. So now it's very easy to put somebody into that arm bar. So the mechanical piece is to do this. Okay? What I would do is I would make that motion with my hand this way. So I get the pressure point reaction, but also if I miss the pressure point, it's going to work pretty good. So this is cheating, but I want it to work. Then I need for you to see this. My thumb is pressing on pericardium 6, Neguan. It's pressing there because pericardium meridian and triple warmer meridian are related to each other, what's called yin and yang. So I'm actually affecting the system. This is husband and wife, it's called. So I'm already manipulating a pressure point on an associated meridian. And I do this at the same time. I twist. So I'm doing all of this. So what people see, it's like a magician, you know. The magician directs you to this hand while this hand is doing the magic. I'm teaching this point, but all of the cheats are hiding in this hand right here and in the way in which I hit in this slightly rising motion. All right, so now here's the other point at the elbow. Right where, above the tip of the elbow, there's the tendon, and in the tendon, there's what's called a body of Golgi's. This is the tendon receptor, and there's actually two pressure points. It's triple warmer 10 and 11. And what we do is, this is considered a rub point. And we think of rubbing between them, rubbing back and forth between them. So it would be rubbing this way. So you rub back and forth between them, and this releases the elbow. So if I'm over here, there's a couple ways to do this. Wally J's favorite was to grab the gi, and then he would just dig his knuckles in that way. Yeah. I was always a forearm guy. I would come here with my forearm like this way. Notice that at the same time, there I am on pericardium again, and as I do this, I also pull. So I'm using two-way action. So I don't just do that, I pull. Now, let's put those together, and this is, I said, cheating. If I hit triple warmer 12, and then from triple warmer 12, rub this way, then it's very fast and effective. Yeah, and so what's happening is we're actually manipulating two different joints. I hit here, this releases the shoulder. I rub here, that releases the elbow. Shoulder, elbow. And it's one simple movement. One simple movement. Now, triple warmer 12 and triple warmer 10, 11, this rub point combination. In particular, when you're practicing hitting triple warmer 12, you can try, this is what I consider the basic way, but also try this. See how I grab differently now? Instead of my thumb on pericardium 6, it's my fingertips. I turn the palm towards the ceiling, and I tap this way, like I'm doing a rising elbow. This allows you to, oh look, now you can do the same transition this way.
Masterclass with Chris Thomas is an extensive library of in-depth video instruction covering Isshinryu Karate, Ryukyu Kempo, Tai Chi, Okinawan weapons, and so much more. It's a great value at $399 per year, but as a viewer of the Pressure Point Dojo, you can subscribe for only $119 per year. That's an amazing 60% discount. Just use the promo code DOJO when you subscribe. That's DOJO in all capital letters.
So I hope you'll think about subscribing, and if you do, don't forget to use the coupon discount code DOJO and get that incredible 60% off discount. And then I have to always remind you, between the time that you complete your subscription and when I'm able to activate your account, there's going to be a delay there. I apologize for that, but trust me, it is worth the wait. The second principle of tuité comes from the teachings of the great Professor Wally J. Wally J was a wonderful human being and a great individual. And his insight and his approach to what's called small circle jiu-jitsu had a significant impact on the development of our tuité. And so quite naturally, the second principle comes directly from him. It's called two-way action. Let's head back to the master class. So let's say that I'm trying to do an armbar, and I'm going to do a kind of armbar that I would never do, but it's for demonstration purposes. So I'm locking them up here. Now I'm going to do, this is one-way action. See, right? So what you can see that I'm doing is I'm pulling up and using as my sort of pivot point right here in my armpit. Now, if he's strong, he gives me some resistance. It doesn't really work very well because that's one-way action. But what happens is if, as I pull up, go ahead, be strong. If, as I pull up, I also drop. So as my hands raise, my shoulder drops. All I do is drop my weight. Boy, that worked good. That's what two-way action is. Fundamentally, that's what it means. That as you go to apply a technique, you don't just pull, but you also push. You do them together, and that's how you get the thing to work. Now imagine that that's what's happening, and you're using a pressure point. And in fact, if you go back and watch me do the arm bars using the pressure points, you'll see that I was always using two-way action at the same time. I would hit, and I would push and pull. I would do that automatically. The place where it's important to really start learning that, in my opinion, is with what we consider to be finger techniques. When you get a hold of the opponent's finger, the most common mistake I see is somebody does one-way action like this. See that? I see this a lot. Bend the fingers back. Oh, I'm bending the fingers back. That just doesn't work. If instead of bending the fingers back, I also pull the fingers towards me at the same time, in other words, I do two-way action, then it becomes almost instantaneous. Every technique can be done this way. So let's take a look at kote-gaeshi. If I'm doing kote-gaeshi, this is the most common way people do it. They go like this. That's one-way action. What happens if, as I push away, I also pull towards myself, pulling the wrist part towards myself, so it looks like this. It's much faster. Okay? So whoop, boom, just like that. Two-way action. Go one way, the other way at the same time. Every joint technique can benefit from understanding this concept. Another example, this, center lock, wrist turn press we call it. If I do one-way action, I could press upward, that works. I could press downward, that works. But if I do them both at the same time, in other words, I think up and down, much faster, much easier to do. So two-way action is a very simple concept. Just think of wherever you contact somebody, you have 2 points of contact. If I'm using both arms, it's easy to see. One arm goes back, the other arm goes forward. If, however, I'm using one hand, now my 2 points of contact are the bottom edge of my hand here and my thumb at the top. Those are the 2 points of contact. I'm not trying to hold on to the middle. There's actually a hole there, a gap. And then I can just do this. I do the simple twisting, opening a doorknob kind of movement. This is incredibly simple to do once you understand the concept. Thank you for joining me here on the Pressure Point Dojo on Channel Fight. I'm Chris Thomas. Until next time, thanks for watching. Now go train.